Hello, everybody, and welcome into another installment of Data Chat Live. This is Cameron Cowan coming to you from beautiful Pleasant Grove, Utah, home of Observe Point here in the shadow of the Wasatch Mountains. And joining me, as per our usual agreement, my friend, my colleague, and the inimitable Mike Fong. Say hello, Mike.
Hello, Mike. Hello, Cameron. Yep, coming to you from this lonely small rainforest in central London.
How is everything over in London?
It's good. Autumn's coming, and we're having a surprisingly warm one actually. So actually, it's still t-shirt weather here, and I know Brits have a reputation for discussing the weather. So I kind of feeling very self-conscious right now.
I would feel awkward if you weren't discussing the weather. That's good. And I know it's been just a little bit longer between episodes for us. Part of that, at least, is because you and I have had the opportunity to do a little more in-person meetings and travel. Tell us where you've been over the last month and a half.
Well, September, we went to, the team and I went to Vibe Martech Fest over in Dubai. Really huge amount of growing interest and massive growth, really, also in the mobile space from a, digital analytics and digital marketing point of view. So it was great to be out there. 40-degree heat. Oh, there I go again with the weather. It was really nice, let's say. And it was awesome to be out there. Awesome to see a new part of the world for me personally. And then more recently, just got back from Amsterdam. That was a data privacy event. And so that was an absolute blast.
What are you hearing about data privacy over in Amsterdam?
Data privacy. Well, it was an interesting one because it was literally the day after I think it was the Danish authorities sided with all the other authorities as well on the Google Analytics decision. But it was also just literally the day of Joe Biden signing that executive order to restart those European and US data transfers. So lots going on. It was great to be part of the panel presenting, and also we had some really fresh current affairs to talk about. Great conversation.
Awesome. Love that. Yeah, no, we just got back here on our side of the pond from Austin, the IAPP privacy event. Another awesome opportunity to just hear what's going on in the industry, to understand a lot of the changes that are happening. I know everybody's concerned over here about, we're now up to 5 data privacy laws for 5 different states. Are we going to get to 50? Is there going to be a national one? So a lot of things for us to feed off of and maybe chat both today as well as in a future episode. But I don't want to spend any more time on us, because today we have a very special guest. We are excited to bring in Mackenzie Knapp. Mackenzie comes to us from cart.com. Mackenzie, say hello to everybody.
Hey guys, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Mackenzie's especially fun for me to talk to. Not only is she just brilliant in the space of digital experience, marketing, analytics, but also has a little bit of common background. So Mackenzie, before we get into what you're doing right now at Cart, why don't you tell the group just how you got into the digital world and what pulled you into our gravity?
Yeah, it's kind of a funny story. It actually brings me back to way back in college days, when I was had studied finance, had discovered everything about big data. Was a term back then that was a buzzword. Data science was still one discipline, and it hadn't really broken up like it is today. But I ended up meeting John Pastana at a conference down in Silicon Slopes and heard him speak. And in that moment of just hearing him talk about this whole industry of web analytics, it was just like, as corny as it sounds, it was for me a little bit like a dream come true, because I did not want to be stuck in boring analysis, and the whole world of web analytics just completely opened up. So he invited me to come in, take a look at the company, and ended up going to work for Observe Point. So I think I was employee 21 back in the day when we were a brand new startup. So it was really fun to watch the growth. And ironically, Mike was one of our first clients. So Mike was actually my most difficult client. He's the reason I left Observe Point. And no, I'm just kidding. But that's kind of the evolution of how I came to know Observe Point, and a little bit of the backstory history. And I'll talk a little bit more about the partnership and what I'm excited about.
I remember, Mackenzie, when I think I was one of your first customers in the UK.
Yes.
And I was actually going on a career break. So soon after I onboarded with you, I actually went on a career break for personal reasons. And as I was, I like to say that back in 2015, I was one of the first people that got to do the full remote working. I actually managed to work from home in Manchester. And before joining Observe Point, I actually kind of interviewed with you, didn't I? It was really fun. And it took you about 5 minutes to realize that I wasn't asking you difficult questions about how to use Observe Point. I was asking you difficult questions about Observe Point. And I remember it took you like about 5 minutes to think, hang on a minute, you're asking me about joining Observe Point? That'll be so cool. And then, yeah, I got to work with Observe Point. We worked together for a few months, and I was working from home in my childhood bedroom. So that was odd, but also really fun.
It was like we did a career swap, because you were in the position I couldn't wait to be in, because at Observe Point, I was always consulting with people, telling them what their problems were. And Mike was one of those people that was always fixing the problems. And I wanted to be on the fixing side of knowing how to actually make everything work. So it was a fun switcheroo we did.
Yeah. And then I drove you away is the story.
Yeah.
Ever after.
So
right?
It sounds like, Mackenzie, I have you to thank the fact that I get to work with Mike every single day.
Hopefully that's a thank.
Credit.
Most days, I would say, absolutely.
I'm just kidding.
All right. So, and you were with Observe Point for a couple of years. How long was that?
I think that was about 2 years.
Okay. And then tell us what you've been doing since then.
Yeah, I actually went into the advertising industry and have built my career inside marketing technology and being an analyst in the advertising career. What was different is I ended up going to a hybrid consultancy. The previous name was Dumont Project, and then we were acquired by Cart.com. What was really cool about that is back in the day, I used to think that advertising agencies were the market makers. You know, they were the people that were actually driving all these sexy commercials that you'd see on Super Bowl ads. And sometimes they are. I think the market has really changed to where advertising agencies aren't really what they used to be back in the day. I know I'm probably going to get some enemies in saying that, but even people in the advertising space know that there is a shift in that landscape. And I think that's the difference is the market makers are not really what they are. They're a little bit more of order takers. So if your client says that they want this, there's not a lot of room for just pushing back. And I think that's a really healthy dynamic that was in the previous industry. So what we did that was a little bit differently is we would work with clients for about a year and we would tell them, hey, we're going to transform your business. And if we can transform your business within that year, then we're going to teach you what we did. And then you won't need us in about 2 years. And so that was a phenomenal model because it really showed people we're putting our money where our mouth is. And that's what Cart adopted into. And what my role in all of that is how do I get all of this data together to help that team make the decisions to really transform a business. And so that's the evolution of like where I've been, how that fits into Cart. And then what Cart does is phenomenal because they're basically anyone who needs to grow your brand and needs to figure out how to launch, you can go to Cart.com. The people who are experts in your brand are most often the people that work for the brand. So Cart the whole mission is about allowing the customer to stay focused on your brand and allow us to do everything else. Think of us like Snowflake, where they sit in the middle. They don't really have competitors in a sense because they can work with so many different technologies. Cart is like that from so many different spaces because we sit in the middle. So we're like the commerce of Snowflake, if you will.
Wow. So if I restate that in my own words, while you do have fantastic services and technology at Cart, a big part of your mission is to teach them to fish rather than doing all the fishing for them so they're not reliant on you ongoing. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the whole goal is that the product that I've helped build is called Unified Analytics. And that brings all of your data from, it's not just about, let me show you your data and you go find the trend. It's about giving you actually prescriptive insights and having that merge across different types of data sets. So it's finance, marketing, merchandising, procurement. So it's a lot more robust. And I'll go into some examples as we talk a little bit further too.
Fantastic. Well, I know that we've been working together behind the scenes for a number of months now. We're excited as part of our show today to be formally announcing the partnership between Cart.com and Observe Point. We've got a number of shared assets that we're putting out. In fact, Mike, I think you've even teed up a couple of things. I know that we're promoting Cart on the Observe Point website. Cart's doing the same for Observe Point as a partner on your website. One of the things that we are launching is the ability for any visitor to the cart.com website, whether you're a customer, just a prospect, somebody just learning more about the business, is you have the ability to run a free Observe Point sample audit directly from your website. Now, let's talk a little bit about that. Mackenzie, you intentionally brought us in. You were very familiar with Observe Point. Tell us a little bit about what you think that joint value is. Why do you see Observe Point layered in with everything you've been doing at cart.com really adds additional value to the customers you're serving?
Yeah. The first thing was we're not competitors in any sense of the term. So I think we just from the landscape, you have a set of clients that are the same set of clients that we would want to cater to. So anyone who has a website, obviously they need to make sure that the data that they're capturing from that website is correct. So in theory, anyone who has a website needs Observe Point. Anyone who has a website often needs cart.com as well.
Obviously, right? The number one choice.
Yeah, obviously. So I think that was a natural partnership to say, we have a really big focus on data enablement. So finding a way to make sure that people have trust in their data is an easy solution. I also love, it takes 9 minutes to get one of these audits. So I think it's just a huge value add to our customers to say, have a sense of security behind your data. Anytime that I give someone even an overview of our own product, there's always a level of having to show and kind of show people that, hey, I know your data is correct and here's how I know it's correct. I think there is a sense of assurity that increases adoption of any sort of technical product, especially when it comes to analysis. So it's a natural fit because we want people to be leaning into data-driven decisions. But one of the biggest blockers for most people tends to be that they don't have trust in the data. And they may not say it that way, but you can kind of observe it in some of their actions.
Yeah, and I heard you say something. I want to make sure I clarify it. Obviously, a lot of times when people hear cart.com, they think specifically e-commerce and retail, but it sounds like you guys are really opening up the realm of what you're tackling. Anybody with a website can use your services and get a ton of value from that. Is that right?
That's correct. So we think of us as a data and e-commerce enablement solution. So yes, we do have some solutions that we have our own storefront that is similar to Shopify, Magento, any of those solutions, but you can still use our services even if you have one of those solutions. So it's about taking the data from those disparate sources, putting that together and teaching you what to do with that data. And that's what makes us more about e-commerce enablement versus, hey, we are just trying to be one person in this ecosystem. We offer a plethora of solutions so that if you are selling trees like Mike has in his background, you can come to us and say, I'm a tree expert, and we have the solutions and the technology to get you off the ground from day one. But you can also come to us with your own tech stack and your own tools.
That's fantastic. Now, one of the things that I wanted to splice in was you talked about your background in the advertising realm, and obviously you have a ton of experience in data governance and data analytics. Talk to us a little bit about how the customers you're working with are measuring the advertising side of their business. I know you and I have had a couple of chats specifically about attribution and some of the cool things you're doing there. Obviously, the landscape is changing with especially third-party data and third-party cookies shifting around on us. Tell us a little bit about how you approach that measurement exercise and layer in data quality on top of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually spoke a little bit about this at Brand Week. So it was some of the world's greatest marketers sitting all in a room together. And Google was one of the speakers that was right before I went on to speak. And they talked about admitting that the cookie is crumbling. That is going to impact your session data out of Google Analytics. So you're going to start to see that you have more sessions that can't get unified to that user. And that's going to start to diminish over time. That's what third-party cookies are. We have a technology that we do place on a site that's a pixel. We call it the Cart Pixel. It's not meant to ever make us compete with Google Analytics. It's a technology enablement solution that helps you get better attribution because it does help device stitch, user stitch the entire story. And it's a first-party cookie. So it is treated differently. We've even talked with Simo Ahava and had him come speak at our company to just kind of talk about these things, bring in some of the best experts that are in the industry. And it's a solution that needs to continue to evolve. And we are continuing to evolve that as well, because There's a lot of different statistical programs as well that Google's adopting that we're leaning into. The second thing behind that as well is not only just, okay, how do I know, do I have the right session level data to be able to apply attribution? That's the first thing, is do you have the right technology to do that? And I think most people in the industry don't right now because they're so reliant on Google Analytics. So I think that's the one thing that I see most often in the industry is if people aren't paying for GA360 or Adobe Premium, they're often using last touch analytics out of Google. They could be using some of their models, and there's flaws. We could talk days on end about that because it's still the underlying same data.
Yeah,
I think that's a big distinguishing factor there. But.
Okay, and as far as how kind of data cleanliness, data governance layers into that, if you're running a really clean program, you've got Adobe or Google Premium products on site, you've got data coming in from your paid advertising, from search, display, social, email, but you've got one or two channels that either aren't part of that mix or that you don't trust the tags because they haven't been implemented correctly or fallen apart over time. How do you think about that holistic marketing mix and making sure you have all the data so the decisions you're being made are on top of the right data set?
Yeah, it does depend on the marketing mix of where your investments are going. So if you are largely placing those investments offline and you're not going to see that on your website, there are some other tools that you can employ. Obviously, media mix models have gotten somewhat of a bad reputation, and I understand. I wouldn't say bad. I would just say that I've seen a lot of poor implementations of them. And I think part of that is just the data quality and the feature engineering that goes into that. I think what we have been able to provide, like we have very strict measurement in terms of what's a good model or what's not. And we've seen phenomenal results. So I would say if you don't have the measurability to be able to know that someone saw this TV ad and what was the response that happened after that, media mix modeling is a great exercise. That is, in terms of data quality and knowing is that data correct, I don't know that you could apply observe point in that instance, but I would say for the other side of the spectrum where you are pushing users onto your website, one thing that is different is pulling through view through data into our model. I know some of the models can ingest that for a limited number of platforms like Google or Facebook. It's the too big. Our model does allow you to pull in view through data through any provider that you're working with. So say that's StackAdapt, say that's any of these smaller partners that you might be investing with, some affiliate tiny partners, anything that has that data that we can ingest in, we're very flexible in that. And I would say that's a big difference. Probably doesn't directly answer your question in terms of like data quality, but gets around there. If you want to poke deeper, I can try and think of a.
Well, and I think the underlying principle that we've talked about in the past is that, yes, you have to make sure you're representing all the channels and all the spend, so you're actually making good decisions, but also you have to make sure that the whatever pixels are on the site, whatever data is being collected is being done in a consistent and clean way. Because as soon as you have 3, 4, 5 weeks of gap where people are like, well, that data doesn't look right. Oh yeah, we forgot to roll it out on these landing pages or this part of the site. And then all of a sudden executives start to lose confidence in all the data because they know part of it was wrong for a period of time. So just that continuous monitoring, continuous governance, I think is a big thing that we tout. And I know it was part of the reason why we started discussions with card.com.
One funny story was actually with Mike. Mike, I don't know if you remember, you kept me up probably for 24 hours, our first couple conversations, but you had a particular issue where it was one browser and it was a common Firefox browser back at the time. And there was some plugin, I think, that many people were using that caused a lot of tags to not fire. I think back then it was Ghostry, or there was something on the site that literally was just a small little piece that broke so much of the tracking and we couldn't figure it out. Observe Point's ability to actually look at things browser specific and mimicking different users on different browsers. None of us could find the issue on our local machines because we weren't on those browsers. And so I think that's another point that I like emphasizing is, yes, you might go on a website and say it's working for you, but are you on the same technologies that are representative of your same sample size that are going to your website? That's what I love about Observe Point, because it really is a surety that your data is working on nearly every type of version that someone could be on. And we all know clients are horrible at updating browsers.
That's really the thing. I always say that here at Observe Point, we bring basically a professional level of quality assurance to digital marketing and analytics, because you look at the web analytics world, the web development world or the app development world, they have dedicated teams of QA team members, right? They will literally dedicate the last day or two of every sprint to testing all the work that's been done by the team. But you think about the amount of dollars or here pounds and euros that are being spent on marketing and analytics, and it's quite plausible that actually you spend more money on your marketing than you spend on your development. But like most organizations spend next to nothing on their marketing QA and the digital analytics QA. So just different browsers and different user agents, that's just one aspect. Like, one thing I was going to ask you, Mackenzie, is Cart.com, are you guys focused mostly on the US market, or are you seeing a lot of your customer base in Europe as well?
We do have a large base of customers that are in the US, but we've definitely seen a lot more interest coming from international. So it is growing, and we should talk more since you're on the other side of the pond.
Yeah. And how are like, ad blockers, pop-up blockers, and consent management platforms affecting you in your day-to-day in terms of the volume of data coming through, the quality of data coming through, and is it just causing some stuff to kind of break or be non-compatible? What are you seeing?
The thing is, we do rely on customers to own their own analytics. And so we try and give them as much consulting advice as possible to say, there are times when some people don't even have someone who's truly managing it, and it terrifies me. So I try and give them the use case, the horror stories, to say you really need to have a person dedicated for data governance. In the cases where we manage that, and we take that on for like a limited number of clients who have opted into other services, but there are definitely cases where it's myself and my team that we do see use cases of particularly the privacy and trying to make sure that clients have the right notifications popping up, that they do have actual opt-out, and that it's actually feeding into data. If someone says, I want you to remove my data, that's actually happening. So deploying some of that for customers has definitely been a challenge for certain sites. What's nice is when customers are deployed on Cart.com, that's really seamless because we work hand in hand with our developers. Whereas if they're on another ecosystem, sometimes making sure that they have all their right ducks in the row can be a little bit of a challenge, but it's all, as long as we follow process, it works pretty smoothly.
Sure.
Awesome. And leave it to Mike Fong to dive right into privacy, because I think, Mike, you probably spend 95% of your day just thinking about the implications of privacy on websites and brands and businesses.
And ranting.
Yeah. Pivoting just slightly, still very timely and relevant. Obviously, we've just gotten out of a couple of years of a different type of world as far as the way people are interacting, specifically in retail and commerce. For many of us, going to a store wasn't even an option for many months or quarters. Talk to us a little bit, Mackenzie, about the trends you've seen just in the last 2 years, and has the pandemic accelerated the adoption of e-commerce and digital shopping experiences? Have you seen people shy away from it? Have you seen people just say, you know what, we actually don't need a physical store, get rid of brick and mortar and go pure play? What have you been seeing?
This has been the most fascinating time because yes, e-commerce has exploded. I think I would be hard pressed to find anyone who wouldn't see that or agree with that. Even people, my girlfriend's a nurse, and they all talk about how Shopify stock went up, and everyone's seen the explosion that's just happened, either with people buying things to remodel their homes. It's exploded in every industry that you can think of. So people are absolutely seeing the importance of having an e-commerce presence. The funny thing is, prior to the pandemic, we worked a lot with CPG brands where we would go in and we would kind of act as like a Bain or McKinsey to basically go in and do an assessment of how well they were doing from their marketing perspective. The funny thing is, a lot of them didn't really care that much about their website. If you go look at some of the biggest CPG brands, you think, why would they need that? They have retail presence, but obviously they were all impacted during that time frame. A huge shift that we're seeing, and this was very evident at Brand Week, is they're absolutely leaning into, we need to have a better e-commerce experience. Whereas in the past, I think people are a little bit more flippant as we don't really need that. There's too much fraud that can come from e-commerce websites, and like the list of why they wouldn't want to do it seemed plausible to them. But I think now that's shifted and the landscape's changed a lot.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I know that just from a personal level, I can look at my consumer spending and how much of it went completely digital. And at this point, even now that we're kind of back to a normal life, it's still stayed that way because people have adopted that mindset. They've said, this isn't an afterthought, this is our core business. And however people decide to interact with us and exchange value and goods, we're going to make that a great experience. And I've certainly noticed that uptick. Whether it was a good thing that we were forced to get there or not, that's another discussion. But I think I am happy that we are where we're at from a digital retail, digital commerce perspective.
The one thing I would say that's really fascinating that we ought to layer onto that is, yes, e-commerce blew up, but the other thing that actually imploded in that large scale is really thinking about what happened to all that inventory. And so on average, I think companies are losing about 30% of their working capital. And it's basically coming from just excess inventory. So what's nice about Cart is we actually do predictive modeling that combines your inventory data with your marketing spend to help showcase, hey, if you took your campaigns that are out of stock and you shifted them towards your excess inventory, you could literally save over, one of our clients I literally was just meeting with yesterday, it was over $300,000. So we're not talking that these are small little things. Being able to control your advertising campaign in combination with what's actually in your inventory management system is game changing for a lot of customers. So I would say that's the other piece is if you're not running your advertising with that in mind, you're kind of behind the game in terms of meeting the supply and demand that's in that industry.
Wow.
End of geeking out. I feel like I keep going on rants with you guys, but
that's the reason we wanted to have you here, Mackenzie. We love your rants. I love the way your mind works. Mike, before we sign off, any other observations that you've had, things we want to grow Mackenzie on? I'm looking at the chat, don't see any specific questions. So if you do have questions for me, Mike, or Mackenzie, please drop them in the chat. But Mike, I'll let you be the first question QA guy. What do you got?
Yeah, the audience has been quiet today, so
Indeed.
we started getting used to. Oh no, Alex Wilson has something to say. Managing spending on out of stock products is a game changer. One of the most important things you can do. Yeah, thank you very much, Alex. That's a very good comment. We'll make sure. Yeah, I don't know what to say to that. Anyway, so Cameron, yeah, I think one of the things I was going to point out is it's interesting how in the past a lot of brands, especially like FMCG or those huge giants like Unilever or Coca-Cola, right, whatever, they would often ignore or purposefully as part of their strategy not have e-commerce. The reason being that their partnerships with their retailers were so important that actually the idea of undercutting their partners was a no-no, and therefore having an e-commerce site was essentially pointless. But now, as you said, during the pandemic, even these brands are seeing, actually, we do need to invest in our website. Maybe it's not e-commerce, maybe it's something else, maybe it's a competition, maybe some kind of campaign. What I found really interesting was, you think about McDonald's, it's a very, very long-standing brand. They've got huge swathes of loyal customers. And I really feel in the last couple of years, they've embraced digital. And at first I thought, I don't need the McDonald's app. I'm just going to walk into a McDonald's, I'm going to buy a burger, right? But even they, with such tight margins, they've really got nothing to give away. They can't really do delivery. They can't really do any huge giveaways. They're still investing heavily in apps and incentivizing people, but they're using it to drive customers into store. They're using the digital channel to actually bring back the value of their store footprint. And so I think that's a really innovative way. I feel for the first few years of their app's existence, I wasn't quite sure what I was getting. And as an industry observer, I couldn't see what they were getting either. But now you can definitely see that they're using it to drive that footfall back into store. They don't really want to work with the Ubers or the Deliveroos in order to, that's a large chop of their margin, which actually they haven't got the margin to give away. So that's the last observation from me for today.
Okay, and one question that just hit the chat, I think this is for Mackenzie. How will you be able to tie in sales done over the phone through third-party services like CallRail. So similar to what
Ooh.
Mike's talking about, the merger of digital and non-digital experiences, a lot of sales do happen over phone still. How do you tie that into your attribution, into your modeling?
Yeah, we do this. We actually work in particular with CallRail and a couple other, like Invoca and a couple other providers that are out there. Very critical, very important to be able to even tie your campaigns to those activities. I think that's the one thing done very wrong a lot of times in marketing, is not being able to tie that was a campaign that came from Facebook, that call that came through. So I think those technologies and tools are phenomenal. We even have a call center solution and a team that's dedicated to bringing in that data, doing the analysis, and combining that with what we have. So we actually pull in that call center data, and it's an add-on to our services. So it's not a traditional out of the box. It does require like a little bit of customization. But once we get that data, we already have a model that syncs right into place with our solution. So it's a common thing that we work with. We actually work with even a lot of lead gen partners. Everyone thinks e-commerce and selling things on your website. It's also a very good e-commerce tool. So I find that a lot of people who are in the call center space tend to be focused around generating leads and things like that. So I would say that all comes into our model, and we have a plug and play system for that. It definitely took time to harmonize that data and get it right. So whoever asked that question, I'm sure that they've seen some of these pain points.
It's one of those things where when you're talking about digital versus non-digital experiences, website versus those lines are blurring so much. And to this point where whether it's a pure play online purchase, ship, and I get it, or it's buy online, pick up in store, or like Mike was talking with McDonald's, using the app to drive in-person traffic. And that's a mixture of screens in the store, your app in the store, physical presence. Or just you think about the Apple model for years, like you come, it's a completely in-person retail experience, but then at the end of the experience, they say, hey, can I get your email address so I can send you the receipt? That's not because they're altruistic and trying to save the trees. That's because they're trying to get data to map your physical presence to your digital presence. I think no matter how you do that, getting that more holistic view of all the touch points, both physical and digital, is becoming more and more critical. Also more and more, well, in some ways more difficult, in some ways easier, but always more important because those lines are blurring.
Yeah.
And Cameron, just to interrupt you there, we did have one question first from Laura, just asking whether we still do those audits. And yes, so for both Cart customers, Observe Point customers, anybody else who just is also listening, you can jump on the cart.com website or the Observe Point website and sign up for your free sample audit. Just follow the instructions on the page.
Yeah, so Mike, actually, if you go ahead and just click that Get My Free Audit button right there, if I'm remembering correctly, that's where you do that. It's as simple as just giving us the URL of the site you want us to scan and your email where you want us to send the results. So this is a big part of the partnership, just making sure that no matter which ecosystem you're from, if you're a Cart customer, prospect, engaged member, and this is the first time seeing Observe Point, this is a cool way to just get an overview and see what we do. If you're an Observe Point customer and in our ecosystem and your first time seeing Cart, please go to their website, see all the fantastic stuff that Mackenzie and her team are engaged with. And no matter where you hit, you can always get that free 100-page audit from the Observe Point engine. All right, I know we've got a few things that have hit the chat box, but we are in the closing minutes. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up from here. Mackenzie, any last words for the audience?
Yeah, I think anyone who really does care about their website, you absolutely need to do an audit. If you're paying attention and you're in these, it's probably because one of us has reached out to you and you've heard about this from us in the industry. The other thing I would say is if you are selling things online, do a free audit, talk to us about what your ecosystem is. And I guarantee you would see actual savings to the dollar, because I do this with clients. I am not on the sales team. I build products. But I'm excited by it. It's literally been the thing that's been the full circle of how Observe Point and Cart.com together, I think, are one of the best partnerships for people who actually want to drive more behavior on their site that you're intending, whether that's leads or sales.
Awesome. Well, we definitely are excited about the partnership. Thank you, Mackenzie, for coming and joining us for a quick chat today. Given all your background and your just insights into the industry, we definitely want to have you come back on. So we'll keep in touch and then arrange that for a future DataChat Live. Until then, on behalf of myself, Mike Fong over in London, Thank Mackenzie for coming. Thank you all for joining, and we'll see you at the next Data Chat Live.
See you soon.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.